Today on CityCast Boise, it's notoriously difficult to get successful traction on voter initiatives. So I invited Luke Mayville, co-founder of Reclaim Idaho, to share how his group managed to get the Open Primaries initiative on the November ballot. He explains why over 97,000 Idahoans signed on and why he thinks people want more of a say in our local elections. It's Monday, July 22nd. I'm Lindsay Van Allen, and this is what Boise's talking about. Thanks for being on today, Luke.
Great to be here with you, Lindsay. Thank you.
So there are two parts to this ballot initiative. There's the open primaries and the ranked choice voting. Could you very briefly explain both of these concepts for anyone who might not be familiar?
Yes, the first part is the open primary, and it's really important to understand what the problem is we're addressing. When you go to vote in the most important primary elections, if you do not belong to a political party, if you are an independent voter, you get blocked from voting in those elections. And the only way you can participate is if you formally join a political party. So we want to change that. We don't think that's right. We think every voter should have a voice in our elections, even if you're not affiliated with the party. And that's the basic idea behind the open primary. Everyone can vote in the same election, regardless of your party. All candidates would be on the same ballot, and the top 4 candidates would go forward to the general election. Once we're in the general election, that's the next part of the reform, which is ranked choice voting. Mm-hmm. And that simply means that when you go vote, you have a chance not just to choose your favorite candidate, but also to rank the candidates 1 through 4 if you want to. You can rank 1 or 2 candidates, you can rank 3, but you can rank up to 4 candidates. The really important thing about it is that it guarantees that whoever wins the election has broad support from the community and doesn't just represent one tiny group of voters.
And I think that's something that there definitely is a lot of support for in Idaho. I've especially seen a lot of support for the idea of open primaries, everyone being able to vote for elected officials in the state in the primary election. But there has been some hesitancy or trepidation when it comes to the idea of ranked choice voting. Do you think that's going to require additional messaging or education to get support from Idaho voters?
Generally, what we've seen is ranked choice voting is less familiar to people. There are a whole lot of people out there who have heard about it and like it already. Probably the number one benefit is that it's a way to make sure that the winner has broad support from the community over a majority of the vote or close to it. And because people are really tired of having elected officials who they don't really feel represent the community.
Absolutely.
A lot of people feel, rightfully, that their elected officials really represent, special interest groups, maybe very narrow, extreme ideological agendas. And people want their officials to, represent the broader community and actually address the interests and the needs that affect everyday people.
Well, and something that I think is very interesting about the idea of ranked choice voting, or that really resonates with me, is that I'm sick of voting for the lesser of two evils and having those be my options. I would like to vote for someone or vote for, rank the people that I think are best. And so that is exciting to me, the idea of being able to vote for who I think is the best, not just the lesser of two evils.
Yeah, it really is an amazing concept. It shouldn't be, but the idea that you should be able to go into the voting booth and actually vote for your favorite candidate. A lot of people don't do that right now because a lot of people look at the candidates and they know who their favorite candidate is, but they also know that candidate probably can't win. So instead of voting for their favorite candidate, they vote for the lesser of two evils.
Yeah, and this isn't your first successful attempt at getting an initiative on the ballot. You also got Medicaid on the ballot in Idaho in 2018, which was ultimately passed by 61% of voters. So are you seeing similar levels of energy and support with this ballot initiative?
In some ways, there's more support for this initiative, but it's a little complicated compared to healthcare and Medicaid expansion. It's a little harder to break through to just the everyday voter who's not really necessarily paying really close attention to all these policy issues. It was very simple to just say, hey, do you want more people, more of your neighbors to have health care? It's a little more complicated to talk about the voting system. That said, at the volunteer level, at the level of people who are joining this campaign all across the state, there's more enthusiasm, there's more commitment to getting this done and improving our election system, because so many people have recognized that the broken election system, this closed primary problem, is in so many ways the root problem that lies underneath so many other problems we have in our state. So when we talk about all these broken healthcare policies, or when we talk about being 50th out of 50 states in public education, and rural libraries closing because of recent legislation, all these serious problems, if you really look closely and look at the root of it, it really is because of who we're electing and how we're electing them.
Do you feel like there's widespread support for this messaging? Or do you feel like it resonates more in certain parts of the state than in others?
This message resonates all across the state. You can imagine, there's a lot of enthusiasm in the Treasure Valley, but then you go up to North Idaho, and the politics of the region has been completely broken by the closed primary system. So we've got urgent issues up there that legislators are not addressing, like North Idaho College.
Yeah.
This wonderful community college with this great tradition in North Idaho is on the brink of losing its accreditation and basically ceasing to exist as it has existed. And the legislators up there just aren't even paying attention to it. But the voters are, and they're really concerned, and they want elected officials who are actually going to, solve problems. So we're getting a huge outpouring of support in North Idaho. When we started our signature drive up there, the number of signatures we needed to qualify the districts, we got them really quickly. Like within just the first several months, we had enough signatures in Sandpoint and Moscow and Coeur d'Alene and Lewiston. So we really do believe that this is a statewide issue with urgency for voters all across the state.
Attorney General Raul Labrador has said that he will attempt to block this measure from appearing on the ballot in November. How are you preparing for a challenge from his office?
We are fully prepared for any challenge from the Attorney General. We are confident that the challenge will fail because the Attorney General's trying to, making all kinds of false claims about the initiative. He thinks that it's somehow unconstitutional. Well, these same types of reforms have already been looked at by federal courts, by state courts in different states around the country, and they've been upheld. So the system we're proposing is what currently exists in Alaska. It's been challenged in court, and it was upheld by the courts. And different parts of this reform have been challenged in federal court, have been upheld in federal court, including by a major decision that was written by Clarence Thomas, upholding the idea of a nonpartisan open primary. So we're fully confident that our initiative will survive any challenge from the Attorney General. I will say, though, it's not surprising that the Attorney General is trying to block our initiative, because the Attorney General is a great example of the type of politician who stands to gain when the system is broken. When very few voters get to participate, that's better for someone like the Attorney General, because this is not an Attorney General who truly represents the majority of Idaho voters.
Luke, I definitely wanted to make sure that we address that the state Republican Party has come out against this ballot initiative And considering that Idaho has a Republican supermajority, how are you going to overcome their opposition?
The state Republican Party has come out against the initiative, but it's very important not to confuse the state Republican Party with ordinary Republicans out there in Idaho. Or among ordinary Republican voters, there's a great deal of support for this initiative. Most of the signatures we collected were in conservative parts of the state. And I don't know if we have the exact numbers on it, but pretty sure the vast majority of the signatures we collected were from Republicans. And meanwhile, we have over 100 Republican community leaders who have endorsed the initiative, including the former Republican Governor Butch Otter, former Republican Attorney General, Lieutenant Governor, Speaker of the House, etc. So we have really strong Republican support for this initiative because ultimately the idea of opening the primary and giving everyone a voice in our elections, this is not a partisan idea. It's not an idea that helps one party or the other. What it really does is it gives more power to all voters, right, regardless of what party you belong to, and especially if you don't belong to a party at all.
Why do you think we're seeing such different Republican positions on this initiative? I mean, like you said, former Governor Butch Otter has very publicly supported it, along with other former elected officials that were Republican. But then the state party has taken such a diametrically opposed position. Why do you think that is?
The big difference, the big debate among Republicans and among anyone in Idaho really is, do you want a system where all voters participate and all voters have a voice? Or are you okay with the system where really only a small group actively participate and have a voice? There are some Republicans, unfortunately, who are really clinging to an idea that, no, we actually want only a small group to participate. Compare that to other Republicans like former Governor Butch Otter, who say, no, let the independent voters vote, because we ought to have leadership in our state, Republican or otherwise. We ought to have leadership in our state that represents the broader community. So we want to hear from all voters. We want to know what their needs are, what their concerns are, and they should be able to vote in every election.
The current state GOP party has been pretty effective in promoting their party's agenda and platform. Despite, maybe these differences in views from other Republicans. Does that concern you at all?
Well, one really important factor is that those who currently control the state party, you're right, they have been somewhat effective, but they've been effective in a very broken system. So their effectiveness in some ways relies on very few people showing up to vote. So when the state Republican Party recently organized their presidential caucus, they only got something like 7% of Republican voters to vote. 7%. And that's not 7% of all voters. That's just 7% of Republicans.
Yeah, wow.
So 93% of the Republicans didn't show up. So you could say, yeah, they're getting their message across, they're really popular among those people who are showing up to vote. But that's like a small private club of people. That's not the public. And it's a very different question whether these same, special interest groups or, party committee leaders, is their message really all that effective with the average voter in Idaho? I'm not so sure.
I think that's an interesting question and an interesting opposition they might have to making this voting more accessible to people, especially in the primaries.
That's right. It's so important for everyone to understand that in Idaho, the primary election right now, the primary elections are the most important elections. The candidate who wins the primary usually wins the general election. And specifically, in most places in Idaho, the candidate who wins the Republican primary wins the election in November. So when you just show up and vote in November, so much of the time the election has already been decided. We want to change that so that in November, there's a truly competitive election process. And so when you vote, it really does feel like you have a voice, because you do. Your vote really helps determine the outcome.
That's all for today here on CityCast Boise. If you enjoyed the show, why not check out our Hey Boise newsletter? We'll be back tomorrow morning with our picks for the best cold and frozen treats around the Treasure Valley. You won't want to miss it.